Thank you so much for joining me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. It's really good to have you with me. I've been having a conversation with a friend of mine about something that none of us really like to think about, and most people are pretty uncomfortable talking about. And that's why today we're talking about life leads to death. They always talk about where your life's going to take you. Oh, you never know. Life might take you around the world, which thank God mine did, and it was pretty cool. You might become somebody famous. You might become the president. You might go somewhere and do something really cool. But I really have to say to you that what you are going to become one day is a corpse. I'm not joking. How many people have you met so far that are 350 years old? Okay. How many people who have you met recently who are 108 years old? How many people have you met that are 150? Yeah, you're going to die. That's a fact. Life leads to death. Isn't it odd how uncomfortable we are with that? Let me tell you why. Because we were never designed to die. When God first formed Adam of the dust of the ground and breathed life into Adam and he became a living being, God intended Adam to live forever. Adam, however, and Eve alongside of him, made a pretty poor decision and disobeyed God, ate the fruit God told him not to. And God told him, you eat that fruit, boy, you gonna die. Yes, that may be my vernacular, but that was the message, man. Don't be doing this stuff. It's gonna hurt you. And they did. And what do you know? We do. We all die. That is the result of sin, just like God said. You don't have to agree with me. You can write me every comment on the planet. I can hack it. I've never apologized to you about being a Christian. I'm certainly not going to start today. But we're going to talk to you about this today from the parenting viewpoint. Because you know what? I had elderly parents, and I knew beyond a doubt that my folks were going to die before my kids would reach their adult years. And this is what I did about it. If we would see a dead cat or dog alongside the road, or God help us all, a living one that had been hurt, I would sometimes stop and let my kids see it. That might sound pretty macabre to you. And it wasn't like that at all. It was that I wanted my children to understand that things died, because they do. Then I really wanted them to understand that people died too. So when my sons were 9, 10, 11, 12, in that range, if someone in our church died, and we went to a really big church with a very wide range of ages, so there were people dying, I would say, every 3 or 4 months at our church, I would have my kids go to the funeral with me. And I would even encourage them to touch the dead person. You know, some people are like, oh, that gives me the willies. Well, there's exactly what we're talking about now. So I would say to them, you can put your hand on their shoulder, or if it doesn't really creep you out, especially if it was someone they knew, once one of their Sunday school teachers had died, you can put your hand on their hand, and here's what you can expect. It's going to be hard and cold. It's not squishy and warm like a living being. They are hard and cold. And this is the manner in which you talk to their family. You go up to them and you introduce yourself. Hello, my name is Violet, and I worked alongside of your mom. I knew your dad at church. We were friends, whatever it is. And I really want to tell you how sorry I am for your loss. I've been praying for you and your family. You tell them the truth. And that's exactly what my sons learned how to do. They learned how to speak to people's family members, shake their hands, put their arm on an old lady, go up to a corpse and physically touch it, and go back in their seat and listen to the eulogy at that person's funeral. They did that at least, I would say, between 12 and 15 times before my folks had died, so that it wasn't the first significant death they had dealt with. They had been there before, seen it, done it, were somewhat familiar with it, so that when my dad died, They both did okay. They were 12 and 13 years old. And when my mother died 4 years later, I can't say they did better because there was a more conflicted relationship with my mom for, I think, all of her children and grandchildren pretty much. But still, they went through it and we talked through it and they did okay. Since then, because I did not do my grief counseling study prior to my folks' death, it was afterwards. And it wasn't about my own parents either. It was honestly as much or more about people losing their children and how difficult it is to process the loss of a baby. So I did that grief study work so I could help people in their grief. Even babies die. Little kids die. Certainly teenagers die. Young adults die. Middle-aged people die. People die. Let's talk about a couple of things that happened lately. First of all, I want to talk to you about Jeremy Renner. Man, I really like the guy. He's an Avenger. He's Hawkeye. Yeah, he's a really cool dude. And you know, he got in this horrific accident. I would say he had a run-in, but it was more like a run-over with a really heavy snowplow, a piece of snow removal equipment, and miraculously, even though his chest got crushed and he should have been way dead, he lived through it. Yeah, talk about God is still ready for that boy to keep breathing. There's no question about that, and I hope that he believes and understands that. So, you know, famous people die. Cool people die. People who aren't that old. People who are extremely strong. People who are famous. Just let's be real. Life leads to death. It's not his time yet, but his time will come. Let's even talk about a bigger deal. There's a football player named Damar Hamlin who plays for the Buffalo Bills. And in a game, bam! And the boy ends up on the ground, which, you know, how many times a day do football players end up on the ground? Except he didn't get back up. They had to go out there and medically resuscitate this boy. And people across the United States of America, including sitting in that stadium, started praying for this man. I'm promising you, death is coming. You can try to pretend about it. It's not going to happen to me. You can ignore it. You can whatever you want to do. But life leads to death. As a parent, one of the principles that you need to lay down for your children is you need to live in light of that reality. You need to take care of yourself. Because you live carelessly, you're going to die sooner, certainly a more ugly death than you needed to. B, you need to live carefully. In other words, don't be careless and stupid. This is how so many teenagers die, frankly, even young adults. But you do need to be careful how you're living. And oh my goodness, I believe, and I know you know this about me by now, if you've ever heard me talk more than 5 minutes, you need to live conscientiously. Like, make some conscious decisions about what in the world you're doing with this life. So I'm pleading with you as a parent. You need to make some conscientious decisions to help your children understand. You will die one day. It seems pretty out there, you know, telling this to an 8 or a 10-year-old, but it's the truth. And if it happened sooner rather than later, what would you want your life to mean? So, Mom and Dad, I'm going to ask you this question. You can call it your challenge question of the day. What do you want your life to mean? Really? You just want to live your whole life playing on your phone, you know, eating McDonald's 3 nights a week, getting fatter and fatter, never really going out and helping anyone else, doing your job and coming back home and having a couple cool friends that you hang out with sometimes. Is that really and truly? That's what you want your life to mean at the end of it when you're dead? I don't really care what a lot of people think about me, to be truthful. But I genuinely care what my kids think about me. And I really care what my grandsons think about me. When I'm gone, I want them to honestly be able to say to one another, and very frankly, even in the quiet of their own mind to themselves, wow, I really love and respect my granny because I know the kind of person she was. I know the things that she did with her life, and I would really like to be like that. I don't know a single thing that would matter to me more than that. So I'm going to give you some very specific things. My granny was not just a Christian because she said so or because she went to church and sat on a pew somewhere. My granny was patient. She was gracious. She was kind. She was honest. She was a very hard worker. She generously gave of her time and her money and her energy for the well-being of other people. She worked hard as a nurse. She took very good care of my dad and our family. Anytime we were together, she talked to me about serious issues of the heart. So though we laughed and goofed around and cooked and ate great food and played Risk and sometimes argued about stuff, at the end of the day, I know and understand who my granny was and how much she loved me. You really do need to think about this. You will live. If you're really blessed, you might live 80 years. You might only live 40. I know of a young woman, 19 years old, who recently died of complications. And we know in this world with COVID that it's happening more often than we can imagine. What are people going to remember about you? What are people going to say about you? What will your life have meant? Because life leads to death. That's a promise. I promise you, you can't change this. I'm going to talk to you about spiritual things for a minute. Because I've been so close to death a number of times, with dengue fever, with peritonitis, with typhoid, when I lost my son and I basically bled to death and they kept reviving me and reviving me and reviving me and reviving me and giving me blood and giving me blood. Yeah, I've really stood there and looked death pretty cold in the face a few times. As a young person, truthfully, it doesn't make me nervous. It genuinely does not make me scared because I really believe what God tells me, that Jesus died for my sin, and I've accepted the forgiveness that he's willing to give me. And because he came back out of that grave powerful and victorious, and I have lived quite a victorious life. Not that I haven't sinned or made mistakes or been stupid, but I mean by God's grace, I have really lived a victorious life. Heaven is where I'm going. Really. As I said to somebody one time, so you're going to hurt me? You think you might kill me? You're going to threaten me with heaven? Sorry, man. That's not really much of a threat. I'm not really scared to go there. And I'm not. In this world, because of sin and trouble and sickness and, very frankly, death, there's just too much here to contend with. When I don't have to contend with it anymore, that's going to be a really happy day for me. I'm dead serious about that. It's not something I'm dreading. It's something I'm excited about. I may not like the trip, and that's what death is. Cancer is painful and difficult and challenging and tears you up and ruins your life and makes it hard to eat and hurts, and I get that. Who wants to go on that kind of a trip? Having a terrible disease, Alzheimer's, COPD, emphysema, cardiac failure, so many of the things that can kill us. Yeah, the trip is the pits. I admit it. But the destination? Whoa! Yeah, I'll be thrilled to get there. If you don't think about these things, if you don't talk about these things, if you don't really consider the reality that one day you are going to be a corpse, that's for real. It's as real as I can get with you. You'll never be able to talk to your children about this. And so they'll grow up with a somewhat unrealistic viewpoint of things. And when it does come, it'll tear their world apart because they won't know how to cope. And we all understand one of our great opportunities as a parent is to help our children cope with the real issues that come to us as human beings. One of those issues is death. Every single one of us is a mortal being, and we are going to die. So, how are you going to live? I hope this has really been a thought-provoking episode for you. I really hope and pray that you are willing to have this conversation, first of all, with yourself, with God, with your spouse, and ultimately with your children. Thank you so much for being with me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.